Welcome to the How to Health podcast. I'm Dr. Lori Marbus, and today I'd like to welcome Mr. Mark Huberman. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Wonderful. So you have a very fascinating story. You're from the National Health Association, a long-standing plant-based organization. But I'm going to let you tell us all the details because it's quite fascinating. And your background, a lawyer and eating plant-based for a very long time, 60. How many years now?
57 in June. 67 in June.
67 years.
67 June 26th.
So since your entire life, the whole life. Okay. So we got to go back because I was doing some research on you, and it said that you had been raised on the Sheltonian diet. Did I say that correctly?
I did. You know, from my perspective, the modern day whole food plant-based movement really owes to Dr. Herbert Shelton and his peers, Dr. William Esser, that founded the National Health Association that was called the American Natural Hygiene Society back in 1948. And Dr. Shelton was kind of the modern day theorist of the whole food plant-based diet. It wasn't called until T. Colin Campbell invented the term whole food plant-based. It was what we considered the natural hygiene diet program, which was basically raw fruits and vegetables, mostly raw fruits and vegetables, eaten whole, unprocessed, without added oil, salt. Salt was considered a poison. Oil didn't have any room in it. Sugar was a stimulant. Coffee, alcohol, all these things just were not normal for human beings. And that was part of Dr. Shelton's health program. And he created something called the hygienic system back in the early 30s, where he wrote a series of 7 books on different aspects of health. Volume 1 was kind of a basic principles thing about how the real key to healthcare is removing cause, which is what a revolutionary concept that we have today. Volume 2 was all about food. He called it orthotrophy and used these kind of Greek terms and all that. But food to him, again, was the fit food for humanity were raw fruits and vegetables, nuts, dates, seeds, as little processed as could be. Food combining was kind of an interesting idea that they had for a long time, although I don't think science has validated that today. But again, it was all about, kind of organizing food. But in terms of what the appropriate foods for humanity, the fit food for humanity, was raw fruits and vegetables, nuts, dates, seeds, baked potatoes, steamed vegetables, things like that. But they thought more raw than cooked was better. More vegetables than fruit was better. Nuts, avocados, those kinds of things were great, but dairy had no place. Sugar had no place. Salt had no place. And if you read, Joel Fuhrman likes to even sometimes cite Dr. Shelton's book, Superior Nutrition, that was written, I think, maybe 1952, one of his late. He was a prolific writer. And Superior Nutrition is, you look at the table of contents, and it's exactly what everybody's talking about in the whole food plant-based diet movement. So I, as one who's grown up in it and whose parents were kind of way ahead of their time in discovering it, I consider myself incredibly blessed. But the credit, in my view, for today's, the real pioneers of the whole food plant-based health movement aren't Caldwell Esselstyn, aren't T. Colin Campbell, although they've given scientific validity and credibility to all of this. But it really goes back to Dr. Herbert Shelton, Dr. William Esser, Dr. Robert Anderson, Dr. Robert Gross in New York, Dr. T.J. Scott in Cleveland, Dr. Gerald Benish in California. These were peers of Dr. Alan Goldhammer. These were peers of Dr. Frank Sabatino, people that taught him. But there's where the real credit goes, in my view.
So that is really fascinating. So where do you think they got this, these thoughts or these conclusions, theories?
Well, Dr. Shelton really kind of put it together, but he drew on people writing in the 1800s that were the health reformers, people that were like Jennings and Trawl and Jackson, and even some progressive MD women who were looking at healthier lifestyles, the importance of fresh air, clean water, women who wore tight clothing. Women shouldn't be wearing tight clothing. It wasn't healthful. And again, Sylvester Graham was one of these early guys looking at vegetarianism more from, and this kind of diet more from the temperance movement. But he recognized that fruits and vegetables, that's how people got well. He had the Graham houses where people would overcome the cholera epidemics by going to Graham houses, where they not only had graham crackers, but fruits and vegetables and clean air and fresh air. And so he was drawing upon all of these observations that a lot of MDs were making even in the 1800s about the key to health was recognizing the causes of illness and what were the fit, proper diet for humanity. And you know, the old kind of things of our teeth are made for chewing, not tearing. And, you know, some of those sort of anthropological views that they put together. But Dr. Shelton really brought it together as a health system. And then, of course, they had their own experience as physicians, their observations of 40, 50 years of dealing with thousands of patients, getting them well from all kinds of conditions, recognizing that there's kind of a unitary cause, inflammation, toxemia, these kind of things that we're all recognizing today. They're all scientifically recognizing and validating that today. They did it observationally. But
it's remarkable because they only had the power of observation, right? They didn't have all the scientific technology that we have now to get down. I mean, it was just in the 1800s that the macronutrients were discovered, and it's
Correct.
fascinating. Okay. So I guess Dr. Shelton, he inspired the Sheltonian diet. Or
Sheltonian
Sheltonian.
diet. Yeah, I think most people would call it the Sheltonian diet, which was, you know, again, more whole, raw, unprocessed. As the closer you got to that ideal, the better you were, and certainly without dairy, without sugar, without salt, without all of these kind of processed foods. The simpler you prepared your foods, the better you were, and they were just way ahead of their time.
So tell me about your parents. Okay, so this is fascinating to me. So how did your parents get involved with this type of movement?
So my parents were typical. I mean, they were the greatest generation. My father volunteered right after Pearl Harbor. They met at a USO in Youngstown, Ohio. 3 years, they corresponded all through the war. He comes home Thanksgiving Day, 1945. They get engaged. They get married 4 months later. My brother comes along. I come along a little after that. But they just lived a typical, there certainly were no health concepts in their life, or no vegetarianism or anything like that. But they had some health problems. They developed some health problems. My father was this very vigorous guy who in like 1950, maybe a year before I was born, collapsed walking my brother on the street with polio, and was told he was never going to walk again. And here's this guy, very vigorous, a boxer. And my father was a hunk. He was a great guy. And that just wasn't acceptable. My mother had chronic appendicitis, had thyroid problems, had a lot of problems. And again, we're facing medical solutions to those things. My brother, who was 3 years older than me, had bronchial asthma. So they had a constellation of problems. They happened to work for a guy who owned a furniture store in Youngstown, Ohio. They had moved from New York because there were no jobs in New York. They moved here. And this guy was a vegetarian. And he had a slant board, and he had a juicer. And he kind of was one of these early health zealots. And he said to my parents, Max and Ruth, I'd like to take you to a lecture to two guys that are speaking in Cleveland. And that's where Dr. Shelton and Dr. Benish were both speaking at a lecture, and Dr. Gross from New York. And, just kind of, we were talking off the air about Dr. Anthony Lim, how for some people, bing, it just clicks and it makes sense. And hey, this makes some sense. So they bought a slant board, they got a juicer, they got a humidifier for my brother's bedroom instead of using inhalers and things like that. My father overcame his polio, amazingly enough, without being in braces and all those for all those times. My mother still had her appendicitis, still had her appendix many years later. So everything's going along, and they're vegetarians. That's about the best you could say for them. They were vegetarians, but they were certainly averse to drugs and medication and things like that. Kind of let the body kind of heal itself a little bit. So along comes their second son, Mark Huberman, 1951. My parents, again, were pretty zealous about this, not really knowing what they were doing, not really having a lot of knowledge base, but all in almost religiously for this. So this is 1951. I come along and they don't want to give me immunization. They don't want to give me milk. They don't give me shot. They don't want to give me milk. They don't want to give me protein, all these kinds of things. And the pressure was enormous. My mother was trying to breastfeed me. The family were calling the health department on them. It was just a crazily a very pressure-packed time. My mother, who was trying to nurse me, her milk spoiled. I developed projectile vomiting. This very healthy 8-pound, 5-ounce baby, 6 months later, like 5 pounds, 6 ounces, a pack of bones. And they were pretty desperate. And they went under the care. Dr. Benish, one of our founders, was in Cleveland at the time. And he said, look, you don't have the confidence in this. I'll take Marky. Let me take care of him. And he did. And he got my parents out of that situation, found a caregiver that could hold me, remove the stress from the pressure that my mom was feeling. I think I may have had, full confession, maybe a little raw goat's milk for a period of time to get through because my mother wasn't nursing. Mm-hmm. I got through it. Amazingly, I got through it. For reasons that as I look back on today, I find still sort of amazing. My parents, because I got through it, because they believed in this Sheltonian diet and health program kind of religiously, or at least it worked for me, that's the way they decided to raise me. So they raised me on raw fruits and vegetables for all my life. And all of my, certainly, infant and grade school, middle school, and high school years. And what was unique is that the rest of the family didn't eat that way. My brother was 3 years older than me. They were vegetarians, although he cheated whenever he got the chance sometimes. My father still smoked for a period of time. My mother was a good vegetarian cook, but not even vegan. I mean, we weren't even vegan. But here I was. I was raw fruits and vegetables, cashews, raisins, and all that stuff. And I guess as I've looked back on it, I guess taste is a learned behavior. Mm-hmm. It's what I knew. It's what I loved. It wasn't an issue of willpower for me. This is just kind of what I look forward to every day. And maybe part of the two secrets that I've sometimes said about it is that I had very loving parents. We were a great family, and food was like the smallest part of our life. We were involved in theater and politics and culture and sports and everything else. So food was just kind of a means to an end, not an ends to a mean. And also my parents also were recognized organic farming before people even know the word. My father on a compost pile before people did that. So they opened a health food store. So we always had the best cashew nuts, the best mangoes, the best pineapples, the best avocados. So I grew up, and friends of mine would come over to our house because my friends enjoyed coming to our house because I had always, my snack were cashews and raisins. I always had a little, before they had trail mixes, I had cashews and raisins, sometimes some dried apricots and filberts, and kids liked that. I mean, it was pretty good. And again, we were a very welcoming house. People loved coming to our house because we had a fun family. So I never considered myself ostracized growing up because I lived or ate differently. And as I got into high school, I was on speech team. I played Little League. I did all these sorts of things. And so here I am.
Excuse me. And no one ever mentioned to you, hey, why don't you have this cheeseburger? Or hey, try this.
All the time. My aunts and uncles all the time. Whenever we would go for Rosh Hashanah, we're Jewish. We'd go over for Rosh Hashanah or Passover, and they would always tell me, here, have some of this. Don't tell your mom. It worked with my brother, but never worked with me.
What did you say?
No, thank you. Just wasn't interested. I mean, it's odd as it seems. I was and I think I am to this day. I'm a pretty comfortable guy in who I am in my own skin. And it's kind of like my father was a lot like that. And, life is more than food.
Yes.
Always for me.
So do you still eat primarily raw?
So there is a story. I just got to finish the story here, I guess. So,
Sure.
So I grew up in the American Natural Hygiene Society, now called the National Health Association, and we go to annual conferences, and that certainly kept our family centered on this and kept them on the train. And conferences were always a recharging of the battery. And every year, my parents would become more involved and would become more evolved in their thinking, and gradually became vegan, and gradually became, you used vegetable oil and corn oil, and gradually got rid of those sort of things. And so they evolved, but I still stayed clean. So I'm going along, but in the health organization, I grew up with Alan Goldhammer and Joel Furman. I knew these guys when they were in college. I knew them. And I knew in listening to all of them that none of even the founders of the doctor ever thought that a raw food diet was necessary to sustain health. In fact, I think most people would say it's probably not even, it's kind of tough to sustain yourself in terms of energy and things like that. But, if you can do it, great. Certainly no harm in it, but it's tough. But nobody's saying it's a necessity. And in fact, as I grew up in the association and listening to Joel Furman and Alan Goldhammer, they're saying for many people, there's actually advantages to steamed vegetables and kale and things, make them more digestible to do those sort of things. So fast forward to I'm 32 years old, and I'm on a vacation to Greece and Italy. Wonderful vacation. And we're touring around, and the way I always traveled, and I traveled a bit of the world, and the way I always traveled is I always had a little bag of apples and a banana and a navel orange and some cashews and raisins, and that's kind of what I did. Never really worried about restaurants, and if I was lucky to find a farm market, that's what I did. So this one particular day, though, it's we're taking a tour from Rome to Naples to Sorrento to the Isle of Capri, and we left at like 6 o'clock in the morning, didn't get back till like 8 o'clock at night. And I used up my apples and my orange and my cashews, and we're wheeling back to Rome, and we stop at this restaurant outside of Rome. And this restaurant had nothing for me. If I could have eaten a baked potato, or if I would have eaten a baked potato, I could have had a baked potato. If I would have had cooked green beans, I could have had some cooked green beans. But I didn't. And I didn't, I didn't think it was just in my nature, and didn't frankly even know what would happen if I did. What would my system do with that if I started eating steamed vegetables and baked potatoes and corn on the cob and all those sort of things and all the great wild rice dishes that my mother made and eggplant patties. But I decided when I came back, I was hungry that night. And I thought, am I doing this because I have to? Or am I doing this because this is just the only thing I've ever known? And I kind of concluded that I'm doing it because it's the only thing I've ever known, and that my peers, Alan Goldhammer, Joel Furman, none of them are telling me I needed to do this. So I decided to come home and give it a shot and see what would happen. So I had one of those epiphany moments where I realized that I could try a baked potato, and I didn't have to put it in my mouth scalding hot. I could let it cool off a little bit before I put it in. And I did. And it was pretty good. And I thought maybe I'd gain 10, 15, 20 pounds out of all that by starting to eat baked potatoes and split pea soup and things like that. But it didn't seem to have any physiological effect on me whatsoever, other than the fact that I found it satisfying. And since that day, at 32 and a half years old, I enjoy having a cooked meal or some soup or brown rice or wild rice or the world is fortunately so much better now with the Kathy Fishers of the world, Chef AJ's making all kinds of great recipes. And so I'm still amazingly clean. I mean, I still will not, there's no dairy, there's no sugar, there's no oil, there's no salt in what I do. But I do enjoy baked potatoes and white yams and split pea soup and all those sort of things. And so again, that's the Mark Huberman journey. It's sustained me pretty well. I did grow up without immunizations and never got the diseases that you're supposed to get because you didn't. I had my first cavity about 2 years ago and had a filling. So wow. 1 in 66 years, I guess, is not too bad.
No, not at all.
Well, I've been blessed. I mean, I just consider myself really lucky, and that I have been given an extraordinary health foundation. I don't think any of us guarantees perfect health, but I look at what I do as kind of hedging my bets, prolonging my life every day. I'm pretty confident that a lot of the debilitating diseases that hit so many of my friends when I go to high school reunions and all that, that's not going to be me. No guarantees, but I think I'm doing everything I can every day with the kind of water I drink, the air I breathe, the kind of sleep I get, the kind of meals I eat, consume. I've got a good shot.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Kim Williams, and he always says, I don't mind dying. I just don't want it to be my fault. So it won't be your fault.
My late grandfather used to say, my brother was a health lecturer and all that, and
Hmm.
very involved in the health food industry. And he said that, most people sadly don't worry about their health until after they've lost it. Or as you'll hear when they come into their health food store, they say, oh, well, if I, smoke this cigarette, well, I'll die 5 years younger or something like that. But they don't. It doesn't. And Dr. Esselstyn, one of my favorite quotes is Caldwell Esselstyn, says, we all have a warranty period, at least most of us. We get us into our 40s and 50s, and the bodies can take a lot. But boy, if you haven't taken care of yourself during your warranty, the warranty will run out. And then so I like to keep, I look at the whole food plant-based diet and lifestyle that I'm on as like my extended warranty. I've bought my extended warranty, and I plan on keeping it in place for a long time.
Well, and that kind of brings us to your lovely wife, Wanda, and you have two daughters, correct?
Well, we have three. It's kind of an
three.
interesting story.
One that you raised, a niece.
We each had a child with prior marriage.
Okay.
But I adopted Wanda's daughter, and then we've had the privilege of raising my niece, who's just a great kid, and we've raised her since she was about 10. She's now 26 or 27. And so we've got three girls. I never figured out the secret of guys, but
I've got one girl and two boys. But yeah, they're in their 20s now. They're amazing.
I know all about girls baseball and swimming and dance, and I'm an expert on everything female.
So how did you, when you met your wife, was she plant-based already? Did you raise your children that way because you had two different kiddos from different marriages? How did that work?
It was interesting. She wasn't at all. And I think part of my kind of philosophy in life is that I'm not a proselytizer about health. If somebody interviews me like you are, or if one of my peers and people on the school board or somewhere that I serve ask me about what I do, I'll talk to them all day long if they want. But if not, I don't. I kind of do it by example. It's kind of why I think the way you should do everything in life, more by example than trying to proselytize or badger somebody. So when Wanda and I met, we were, we had both been just recently divorced, and kind of too long of a story, but how we met, but it got kind of a romantic side to it. But when we met, our first date, actually, she had heard that I was a vegetarian, but she didn't. She was raised on a tobacco farm in the South, and she didn't know anything about this stuff. But she knew I was Jewish, and that was kind of the most unique thing maybe about me. But when we met before going to a show at a community playhouse, she knew I was vegetarian, so she had wine and cheese tray for me. And I, nothing that I did, but I didn't make any big deal about it. I just said, it's interesting. It's not what I do. And we just chatted and all that. And so I suppose maybe where I won her over a little bit is that she worked nearby where I lived. And so during the lunch hour, she would always come home and I'd make the best fruit salads and the best vegetable salads. And I said, yeah, sure, I'm making it with you. And I know how to do that really well. And that was pretty good. And then another little hook was that her daughter, our daughter, was obese when we first met her, at least pleasingly plump when she was little, and wandered into my health food store, my parents' health food store. And they gave her the book Sugar Blues, and talked to her about how, vegetarian diet, and, is a way you could avoid surgeries and things like that and lose weight. And so her daughter, she kind of went on vegetarian diet and lost lots of weight. And so that was kind of impressive. My wife, I would say, is that I've often thought that there's sometimes two kinds of people in the world. There are those that are kind of medically oriented. They just kind of like, they want the doctor for everything. Give me something to take. And then there's those that are kind of like, don't like needles, and are skeptical of medication. And fortunately, my wife was kind of one of those who really didn't like blood drawn. To this day, doesn't like blood drawn. So she was just kind of skeptical and kind of open. I guess I would describe it. There's people that are open and there are people that are closed minded about health and things. And I think she was always open. So it was just kind of gradual, and we took our time. And she started coming to conferences with me, and had the privilege of meeting Lisa Furman and Jennifer Goldhammer and Jennifer Morano, people raising children same age as our kids. So that was kind of a powerful introduction. And at these conferences, again, we've had these annual conferences for going back 70 years and 60 some years, and lots of like-minded people eating the right kind of food. So over time, it's a journey. She was not like me. She was in the pleasure trap like so many other people. When you're raised, you're conditioned to like certain foods. And so I like to say that, when we got married a couple of years after we met, I was always supportive. We always had good salads and things like that. But I would say that Wanda had the health food, junk food, the Amy's pizzas. It was vegan. I would buy the organic coffee. I would get the soy creamers, the organic soy creamers, and a lot of those sort of things. It was a journey. So she went to True North once to deal with some stress in the family. So she did that. So then that was part of the journey, the eyes opening a little more. And the eyes continued to open, and it's a journey, again, for I think most people. And finally, in 2011, she worked in a high-pressure job, and she just decided that, there's life is more than money and more than, a good company. And that she said, she knew Alan, she knew what was right, but you just got to make the commitment. So she called Alan Goldhammer, said, I want to come out there. And she bought a one-way ticket. And fortunately, the company valued her highly. So they let her, they did not, they allowed her to take this sick time and all that, short-term leave. And that's where she kind of got SOS, salt, oil, sugar, had to go. That was the pleasure trap triad that had to go. She also kind of, for the first time, figured out exercise and giving some time for herself. So she came back and did Pilates. She fasted 19 days, I believe, in True North. But then, it just shifted. And she came back, the refrigerator, the pantry was empty of all the health food, junk food. And it was just, that was her aha moment. And I would say, by anybody that sees Wanda, she's younger than when I met her. She's probably as strict, if not stricter than I am these days, quite passionate. And I think what I admire about it is that I think it's, for somebody like me who doesn't know any better, kind of brought up the way, never got started on any other way of living, that's not such a challenge to resist the pressures and temptations of life. But for other people, that's a lot. That's a lot. And to make fundamental change like that is an extraordinary human quality, challenge, undertaking. And I feel like I've often said, I think I've just kind of died and gone to heaven, because to share this, I would have done what I did anyway. But, when we travel, to have to go to a Whole Foods salad bar because Marky wants to go to the Whole Foods salad bar, rather than, even a vegetarian restaurant or something like that. We now share that, and that's extraordinary. Right. When we travel, to share that, to come from the same reference point is, who would have thunk? Right. And we've been married 26 years, and it's better than ever.
That's awesome. We transitioned 6 years ago, and we've been married 25 years. And I did it literally overnight. And my husband ended up losing 65 pounds. All the kids are plant-based now. My daughter's fiance is plant-based. She's in medical school. He convinced his parents to go plant-based. So what's really fun is to see the ripple effects. So now you have your wife on board. Are your children also all plant-based?
My daughter in my first marriage has always been vegetarian, but she's kind of gourmet. And so I think she's kind of a wannabe vegan one of these days. But she's just, some people are just blessed with health. And she lives in New York City. She's a starving artist and all that. And she writes plays, and she's just living her dream in New York. And she rides her bike across the Queensboro Bridge. She rides everywhere, walks everywhere. So she's blessed with seems blessed with a pretty good constitution. She knows what to do when she gets sick. She knows, the water fast or the juice fast, or she just knows. So she's blessed with it. My older daughter, that's more of a challenge. Hasn't escaped the pleasure trap. She knows what to do. And one day, I think that's what I've always thought about this way of living. My mother once said, the toughest people to sometimes convince are those closest to you. and it
I
breaks your heart
agree.
when you
Yeah.
see them do what they do. But you got to have you can't force your way. I'm a Broadway a frustrated musical comedy actor, and one of my favorite songs was from the musical The Fantastics that I did back when. And there's a song that says, "Never say no." Why do the kids do something like that? They do it because you said no. And so you try to set the best example you can. My niece that we've raised, she's the most interesting story. She's a strong-willed, strong-minded kid. She knows. So when she comes home, she often raids our soups and our cantaloupe and things like that. She knows. And she said that before she gets pregnant, she and my wife, we're paying for it, but she plans on going out to True North a month or two before she gets pregnant to be as clean as possible when she brings a child into the world. And she's already figured out that my wife is going to be helping raise this child. But she's a strong-minded kid. So, so that's where the three of them fit in the scheme of things.
Yeah, it is tough. So when I came home, because I had a patient encounter that was really cool, and did this, I mean, I threw everything out literally overnight. And so at home, completely plant-based. And then we go out, people would order what they want. So the kids would order their steak still or their meat or whatever dishes they wanted. And what was interesting was over the course of about a year, they're ordering the tofu instead of the meat dish. I'm like, But I tend to be a little bit more, I am a proselytizer of health. Maybe it's the doctor in me. I don't know. I just feel like there's such an urgency because I've seen the path of destruction with chronic disease over and over and over again over the last
you have
15
the
years.
benefit of being a doctor. That does
Yeah,
give
that's
you
true. A
credibility,
little bit of credibility.
you know?
Honestly, I almost think the doctor should have the least credibility because we don't, those of us who, in traditional as an MD, when you go to medical school, you don't, obviously you understand, we don't get that training. And we have this mindset that we know what we're doing. And so I think it's almost harder. I don't know, there's this balance, right? So I think doctors can definitely have credibility. And if they're trained correctly and understand and read the science, they'll be convinced of a plant-based diet's the way to go. But then there's this other egotistical component of being a physician, like, oh, I already know what I need. I'm a doctor. I write scripts. I do this, because I've certainly ran into that with colleagues. Others that are like, whoa, that's really cool. What's going on? Others take a little convincing. They're kind of in the middle, your slow transformers. But then there's these others that are just super difficult. I mean, I've had colleagues unfriend me on Facebook because I talk about plant-based diet on there and explain and share studies, and they just don't like being told what they don't want to be told.
Fortunately, I think that, again, using as a reference point my growing up in the 50s and the 60s, and being, a bunch of chiropractors kind of advocating this kind of heretical extreme diet to today, where the number of people like you are increasing exponentially. And we got a long way to go. I mean, we've got a long, long way to go. But there's certainly, for people that want the information, it's there on so much more of a credible level. I never would have dreamed in growing up that I would see a documentary like Forks Over Knives. What the Health, Game Change that's coming out. One after the other, they're coming out, and they're not just, these aren't sensational kind of movies. These are with great articulate spokesmen of our health. It's not like even Super Size Me that was just kind of like, having some fun. This is really giving great credibility to this movement that's making it much more less extreme.
Right. And I agree.
People are more open to it. So you're not coming from some extreme reference point anymore. Certainly being vegan is a much more socially acceptable, respectable thing. Although I got to say that vegan, as plant-based Maury Marbus, had nothing to do with health, and often it's so far from health. It's just what the health. It's really something. I was just we had the NHA had a booth, a vendor booth, at the recent Michigan and Cleveland Veg Fest. And the Michigan Veg Fest was extraordinary. Joel Furman and Joel Kahn were speakers. They spoke to 2,000 people. It was extraordinary. It was really just a great moment. The Cleveland Veg Fest was not quite of that kind of quality, although Kim Williams was there, so that was
Yep,
very.
I spoke to him about that
Well,
actually.
what of all of the vegan food, and there was one food vendor after another, what was the most popular vendor table at the Cleveland Veg Fest? Vegan donuts. The line was snaked around the building for vegan donuts. There was nothing healthy about them whatsoever. And when they ran out, they didn't even make them on site so you could even see what they were doing. When they ran out, people waited in line an hour to the next delivery of them. And as we went down the road of one vegan vendor after another, there was nothing that we could eat. There was nothing without added oil, salt, or sugar. There was a smoothie place. I guess we could get a smoothie. But it's sad that, I mean, it's good that, again, promoting a vegan lifestyle is great. I mean, it's better for the environment. It's certainly better for the animals and all that. But in terms of health, it's an unfortunate, I don't want to say distraction, but I sometimes wonder if this is a good thing or a bad thing. It's a good thing, again, a good thing for the animals. It's a good thing that it's making dieting and going to a restaurant much more socially acceptable to ask for, an alternative meal. Mm-hmm. That's good. But boy, there's a dark side to it all, I think.
I spoke to Dr. Williams because I speak to him regularly because we're working on the journal together. And what's interesting, the journal, someone doesn't know yet, it's the International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention that we're promoting or launching with the Pro Nutrition Project. And Dr. Kim Williams is our editor-in-chief, and I'm the managing editor. That is way cool. Lots of work, but really cool. With that, you're absolutely right, because he says, I spoke at the Cleveland Veg Fest, and he goes, it was really disturbing to see all the vegan junk food. And, it's really a good point to bring out, because people, when I don't say the word vegan very often unless I'm in front of a vegan audience and speaking to that effect. The reason is because they can, right? You can have soda and, vegan donuts and Oreo cookies and still remain vegan. Exactly. And the unfortunate thing is, I think my greatest concern is as this movement begins to take off, when people are going, I'm vegan, and they don't understand even those transitional foods are unhealthy, like the Amy's pizzas and the different things. What can happen is they're still going to get sick. And that's going to invalidate many of the things that we're claiming, right? Because people don't make that distinction between a whole foods plant-based diet and a vegan diet. And that's really, really important. So that's really why I try to express whole foods. Well, that's not the vegan junk food.
Alan Goldhammer coined the term vegan SOS. I think that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. It is whole food, it's plant-based, it's vegan, but it's without added salt, oil, and sugar. When you take those three things out, most of healthy vegan food. It has added oil, salt, and sugar. If it's vegan, it's not having dairy, but it's got all kinds of sugar in all its iterations, from maple syrup to agave to who knows what.
Right.
But if you can, so I think that, again, the term vegan certainly is an important concept in the world. And, exponents of veganism like Victoria Moran and Neil Bernard and Frank Sabatino and Michael Clapper, they bridge that really well, and they give it the respect that I think, and the philosophic integrity that I think it deserves. I consider myself a vegan. Again, my concern is the vegan eating part of the world is just so compromised that it's unfortunate.
Yeah, but one of the things that it is bringing, though, is the attention to food. And food as that we're not, I love TED Hour podcasts, and there was one that I listened to is how the world is interconnected, right? So it's not just you and me and the separate communities and humans and the rest of but how our influence on a very specific environment. So there was one in particular, this gentleman, he became enthralled with rewilding, where they introduce a species that may have been removed from an environment and then reintroduce. For example, the wolves in Yellowstone. And what they mentioned was how you introduce a small pack of wolves, and how that, because when they had been removed, they had the deer that were overgrown, then they ate too much vegetation. It changed the rivers, even how they flow, because of the integrity of the land around it, which decreased, I mean, all these ripple effects. And so when they reintroduced the wolves, how things changed in a very short period of time. You know, ecosystems changed. More birds came because there were more trees, because of the land, and wasn't being eaten by all the deers, and all these different, I mean, multiple things just happen. And I think about that to us in this environment when we're talking about food, but it brings attention to food, right? We're bringing it to the attention of how it affects our health and our long-term, not on our personal, but what's going on with our communities and our nation's health, the economy, the ability to do things. Well, we have a national presence in places that we need to be, because we have a military that can sustain, that we can sustain. I was active duty, so I've seen patients, or individuals get kicked out because of diabetes and sleep apnea. Those are just small things, like, the shortened lifespan. Kids are getting sick younger. I mean, there's just so much. And then the environmental, then the animal, and then the planet, right? And
imperative.
It's absolutely imperative. So there's not a second chance here, folks. So, and I didn't really understand that, when we're raised in, especially in the United States. I mean, I've been to Africa, I've been to South America, I've been to the Middle East. I understand the challenges of life in general. But when we live here, because we have everything at our fingertips, we have Amazon. I can order food. I do not have to step outside of my house for anything. I mean, I can have my food delivered. I can have laundry detergent delivered. I have water. I have everything I need literally here. But so that isolates us to the rest of the world, right? We're not socializing with our neighbors. We're not understanding that they're struggling with whatever. That it's so much that we're so given everything that we don't understand the value of the nature and the world that we live on, that we're extracting all of these things from. And I never really understood that until I changed my diet to a plant-based diet, because veganism, in the true sense of the veganism, the environment and the animals, really turned my light on to my thought process. And it just like, wow, it changed my paradigm of viewing the world, that I'm not just a human living this existence, that there's so much more. And I'm a Christian, and so I should have known that already. I should have understood that, but I didn't. And so that really even makes my faith even more precious to me. So I understand so much more about teachings that I see in the Bible about that type of thing. So really fascinating transformations in people. I know I become much more humble in the fact is like, Lori, your decisions every day make an impact in how you talk to people. It's just really amazing. That's what I enjoy, is the human growth, right? I consider that I feel like I'm a better adult. I'm adulting better now that I'm vegan in the sense of that. So.
Dr. Shelton wrote, again, way long time ago, long before people were popularizing a lot of these concepts. And I remember a chapter he wrote in one of his books about hunting, and about brutalizing behavior creates brutalizing personality. And I think obviously you can't oversimplify that, but as a general concept, I think if we all didn't kill for food, we'd be a lot more sensitive about each other. I think if we thought about where our leather belts come from and our leather shoes and things like that, and thought about, and unfortunately, getting exposed by, getting light being shined on these slaughterhouses that are outside of where we all see. But when we see how that happens, I think we'd be a gentle humanity if we adopted a vegan lifestyle. Not only would it be better for the animals, it'd be better for us. I've always believed that. I not that I know that every hunter are brutal, or people that are going to be murderers or axe murderers or anything like that. But I just think in the bigger scheme of things, we'd be a more humane world. We'd be more sensitive to each other if we weren't involved in killing for food.
I think you're exactly right, because it brings out, it makes you reflect on things that you are doing on a daily basis and how it affects not only the earth but others. I think I've certainly become more compassionate in my sense of how others, I interact with others, because one, I'm not just now, as a physician, for example, I wanted to become a doctor since I was 10 years old when my little sister was very ill and got well from a physician. And it was just so amazing at the age of 10 to think, wow, I want to do that. I want to make people well. And it wasn't from an egotistical standard of like, I'm going to be saving the world, but it was like, how cool to be a part of someone doing better. And what happened was in medical school, it's a survival mode, number one, to get through medical school, especially 20 years ago, or even before that for some people. But what's interesting is that you become so indoctrinated that you know the information, you do an intervention, be it a drug or a surgery, and that fixes it. And so that is kind of the training, right? So it's not the compassionate listening, sharing. Certainly there's parts of that, but they don't focus on that. There's so much to learn about the body, the physiology, the disease, the pharmacology, all of these different things, that's what you're focused on. So when you go into practice, you're thinking, okay, I have the tools now to make people well. That's what's going to happen. So then when you sit down, you start writing scripts for diabetes, and they continue over 5 years, and yet you're controlling numbers, you're following guidelines, but they continue to get, worse and worse and require more and more. It's kind of disheartening, and it's frustrating.
You would have been right comfortable with the hygienic physicians of old, of Dr. Shelton. They looked at the whole body. And I think, unfortunately, what has happened with modern medicine is that even those physicians that are in family practice, refer everybody out for all these special things. There's no real captain in charge. It's a sad commentary on our being. That's what I find is so amazing about a place like True North. It's kind of like a hospital where you can go, but you get comprehensive care. There's somebody in charge of everything. And you have all these complementary physicians can weigh in and bring the benefit of their special training and unique perspectives and all that. But there's one person. I remember when my mother broke her hip at age 90, and it had been the first time I'd been in a hospital and had to deal with that. You go to the cast person to do this. You go to the physical therapy person. The surgeon, gifted human being, would put my 90-year-old mother back together again like that. You never see her again until the exit conference, like 6 months later. There's something wrong with that system where the psychology of the surgery is as big a part of healing and recovery, but that's not how we work. There's the cast person, and whether it's the dermatologist or it's this, everything is so specialized.
Well,
you really lost something.
But there's a reason for that, right? Because let's think, even when I started, I finished we got married. I stayed home for 6 years. I had my 3 kids. I went back to medical school. They were 5, 3, and 10 months old. So, it's, I'd say over 15 years that I've had experience in the healthcare as a physician. What's happened is that even in the short time that I've been a physician, you're seeing a more complicated patient. So, and where I was in Colorado, where I was in the Air Force in Virginia, then I was in Colorado. I trained in Texas, but in Colorado, it was a small space, so I didn't have endocrinologists down the street. There was one infectious disease specialist on the entire side of Western Colorado. There was 0 pediatric intensive care units on the west side of that state. There's still to this day. And you have to fly someone to Denver. So I got the full spectrum. So I had to be the captain of the ship for my patients. I did inpatient, outpatient, did everything. So, and that's how I was trained in traditional family medicine. But the problem is, when I start getting these elderly patients, or even now younger patients, you have severe diabetes, you have someone who needs this possibly renal dialysis, you have this COPD, you have all of these horrible things that then someone who does see a specialist, they add more medications. And it's just, an hour visit's not even enough to go through the medications and say, is this a potential side effect that's causing, it's become so complicated that you have to segment or compartmentalize our health. But then I was like, something is wrong with this, people. It is not normal to be sick. And we forget that because we get so entrenched in this trying to keep our heads above water in managing all these complicated patients. It's
genius.
insane.
It's the genius of, again, the hygienic physicians that I grew up with,
Yeah.
that were the peers of Alan Goldhammer and Frank Sabatino and Joel Furman, these kinds of guys that were that they recognize that the body is really, does heal itself if given the chance, and it's self-correcting. The body does work. Again, to a point where we've so broken ourselves down that dialysis is the only route you got. But hopefully, that's not where most of us are. The body has so much ability and so much capacity to repair itself, to heal itself. I find the most amazing thing to me today is when Frank Sabatino and these guys are writing about the science of epigenetics, that you've got these, that yes, Angelina Jolie has a history of breast cancer in her family. You don't have to have both your breasts cut off. You really do have the ability to turn those genes on and off. That even not only can you prevent heart disease, you can reverse heart disease through a whole food plant-based diet. This is pretty impressive stuff. And it all goes back to the fact that the body, if given half a chance, really has amazing capacities to heal. I often say sometimes, people don't think twice about it. If you get a cut on your wrist, you put a Band-Aid on it, it heals. It just kind of closes up and it heals. And if it's not too big, even without stitches, somehow people don't think that it works that way inside. But it does work that way inside. Inflammation, those things, if given a shot or if given a lifestyle and a diet and lifestyle, you really can. Healthcare, self-care can be healthcare. It really can. Health can result from healthful living. That's what we've been teaching at AHA for 70 years. And now science is validating that.
Yes, I'm hoping to be a part of that. So the thing, though, however, is physicians don't understand that.
More and more are.
Well, yes, trust me. I'm one of the most positive, optimistic about trust me. But there are plenty who do not. And I will echo Dr. McDougall's sentiment on that. But however, when you think about it, we don't understand that when you're trained, right, to do medications, interventions, we don't understand that there is a way to feed the body that will highlight those abilities and regeneration and disease reversal or disease or health optimization. We don't understand that there's that optimal health or nutrition because there's so much. And trust me, I am a conservative person. Financially, whatever, but there are so much. It's so frustrating with big corporations and the government and their advertising. We're hitting us all the time, right? Yeah. And it's so frustrating because physicians are just as likely to be affected by that. And if I hear one more person describe the paleo diet and eat protein, I'm just like, for goodness sake, you just want to scream at someone.
Here we are through this vehicle that financially costs very little to project it to you. We were just when the documentary Eating You Alive was just reintroduced. We rented a theater here locally, and the place was packed, and you were able to show that. So I guess where my great optimism is that for those that want the information, it's never been more readily available. For those that want to find a Lori Marbus of the world or Kathy Paget here in Youngstown, Ohio, or Alan Goldhammer at True North, the opportunities are there like never before through vehicles like the internet, through film, through these, for all the garbage and all the noise that's out there and all the confusion. There's never been more good information available. And for that, I'm eternally optimistic.
But you almost have to have an enlightened.
Try to eat at the salad bar, and the salad bar is the fruits and vegetables are about it. You can't even get brown rice anymore.
Exactly. I know.
That aside.
I mean, but yeah, absolutely. But the point is here is that we don't even know to be asking that question. So that's, it was a patient who came to me and said, meat and dairy upset my stomach. And I said, stop eating meat and dairy, not thinking that left her a plant-based diet. She got better, but her daughter went on the diet with her, comes back in 30 days and pulled herself off 2 ADD meds. It never even dawned on me. And I consider myself a really inquisitive individual, open to learning. that when she was able to do that at 16 to pull herself off 2 ADD meds with all she did was stop meat and dairy, I was like, what in the world? And the mom brought her back to that appointment. I was like, she goes, what happened, Dr. Moore? I was like, I don't know, but it just blew my mind that could even be a question to be asked. I mean, that is the key, because if we can get in front of enough of physicians, and I think we got to start with the medical students, right? Because I'm a mom of a medical student. It's like, it's so important.
That's Dr. Clapper's mission right now in his rewiring. Is to try to be available, or try to reach out.
Second evolution. Yeah.
That's what he's trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely critical. And I think, there's another important part of that too, is helping medical students and physicians understand the value of their mental and spiritual health too, right? Because there's such burnout, and we have the highest rate of suicide of any profession. And I just, it's devastating, because I know people who've done this and others who've been affected. And it's just so heart-wrenching to say there is such a different way. Because I will tell you, I've been to the American Academy of Family Practice conferences. I've been to Plantrician Project or Dr. Bernard's conference, to the Esselstyn Farm. There is such a difference in the communities to the two different ones, which we need to bring up. Your conference is coming up. I mean, that is incredible, right? Just the community, because you're focused on thriving and health, and my patients get better and yours get better, and let's share these stories. And if we have struggles, how can we make them even better with what we can work with? I mean, that is such a different environment.
The different energy.
I mean, energy. It's the vibration is so, it's just like, I feel like I'm walking, my husband goes, you're going to your tribe. I was like, yes, well, I'm going to my tribe.
Think about this. So you've been going to the Plantrician Project, and you've gone to Dr. Bernard's great programs that he does, and the Esselstyn Two Forks program. They're great. The National Health Association, we've been doing this since 1949 was actually our first conference. And the flock was much smaller in those days than it is today. But, there are so many great exponents of it now. There are more communities for people to reach out to and link up to. There are plant-based Clevelands, plant-based Michigans, plant-based. There are the Campbell pods that they have in various places. There are more and more people are connecting to those things, and they're certainly helpful, because it can be a pretty lonely life trying to follow a plan. Even if you're really passionate about it, even if you really believe it, it can be a lonely undertaking. And I think having that sense of community, I think that's what John McMahon on the I Thrive series. I think John is trying to help people gain that sense of community and the confidence that comes from that, and the determination that comes from that. But again, my great source of pride is that the National Health Association has been having those kinds of communities and having those kind of connections for a very long time. And we have one, if I may, I'll give a little plug.
Please. No, yes, absolutely. And I'll put a link.
The Cleveland Airport Marriott, where there will be 300 like-minded people with your meals, all vegan SOS, the gold standard of eating. And you'll have in one weekend, Dr. Joel Furman, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, Dr. Joel Kahn, Frank Sabatino, Stefan Esser, Pam Popper from Wellness Forum, who's just one of the brightest ladies I've ever met in my life. They're all going to be there for this one weekend, and you'll have all your meals included. The hotel rate that we have at the Cleveland Airport Marriott is $89 a night. You can't do any better than that.
That's awesome.
It will be a real sense of community. If anybody has ever gone to a True North extravaganza at True North that he does over that Alan Goldhammer does at the holidays, this is like that on steroids, because you're going to have so many more people. Rather than 60, you're going to have 260, and it's a great opportunity. And again, in terms of seeing the best of the best and being inspired by them is really something. And every time we have one of these conferences, a number of young physicians show up, because they've kind of heard about it, they want to know more about it, and they're there, and then they get inspired, and they become part of that community too as physicians. So I'm really looking forward to it. We had an incredible event last year, and we're going to have like twice as many this year. And it's $550 for the weekend, And that includes all your meals. And you won't have to think twice about the kind of meals here. You won't have to ask, and they'll all be vegan, SOS, and it'll be great. And there really are it just makes it that much more fun. So I hope people consider if they want to have a great weekend, just a vacation, where they won't have to cook, don't have to think about their meals, and be inspired by the best of the best. This would be a great weekend to put on your calendar. But if they can't do that, if they can't do that, one of the unique things that we do in the National Health Association is we publish a magazine. It's the only thing we do. We don't sell anything. We don't sell pills, potions, vitamins. We don't sell anything. We just sell information. And we publish for over 30 years a 40-page magazine called Health Science, which is kind of the name is because we look at health from a science standpoint. And ours is kind of the gold standard of health. It's a 40-page magazine with no advertising, nothing. Just articles and interviews with Joel Furman and John McDougall and Michael Clapper and Neil Bernard, people like Lori Marbus. Those are the people that write for it on a regular basis, and testimonials and stories to kind of help you keep part of that community. And there's also in every issue there are recipes by the vegan SOS top chefs of the world, the Chef AJs and Kathy Fishers and Katie Mays. So you get that, and when you join the NHA, which is only $35 a year, you get the magazine as a subscription to that is included. And when you join and you register on our website, you can register and gain access to 30 years of back issues for nothing, as well as ebooks of some of the classics of the natural hygiene movement are available for free for download. So $35 a year. And if people who are watching this want to get a sample of just how good it is, they can email Mark M. Huberman at healthscience.org, mention that they saw your show, and I'll email him the latest issue of Health Science Magazine, which I'll hold up, that happens to have a feature interview with Chef AJ. And she has a brand new book out, and it's a blast of an interview. It's got great articles. It's got an article by Dr. Chinchilla Moraes at True North on what's up with sugar and all the different kinds of sugar there are. Pam Popper has a great article on should men have a PSA test and dealing with prostate. Just some great, wonderful testimonials. So if they email mhuberman at healthscience.org or just visit healthscience.org, they mention Dr. Marbus, and I'll be glad to send them a, if they like it, then they'll get a hard copy if they join.
I will definitely put all in your poor email here. Hope you're ready.
That'd be great.
No, I'll definitely.
It's my pleasure in life. You know, we don't, it's unique in the NHA is that we don't sell anything. We're not doctors. I'm not trying to sign up patients. We just sell knowledge, because this has been what my whole life is all about. My greatest joy in my retirement, I just retired after 30 years as a judge, magistrate, is shining a spotlight on the great work that Joel Furman, Alan Goldhammer, Lori Marbus, all these people are doing. That's what that's my mission in life. It's
and to be a part of it.
Yeah.
It's what?
It's my mission in life. It's a great source.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that is, it's awesome. One that it's just like your life was preparing for this moment, right? You were just setting foundations as you moved along, and because you've been involved with this for so long, since you were like 18 or something.
It's a great sense of pride that I consider. I'm not a doctor. I'm a lawyer, a judge, lawyer.
Won't hold that against you.
I consider myself a peer and a great personal friend with Joel and Alan and Doug Lyle and Caldwell and John. That's just that's a really rewarding place to be in life, and to be at this stage of my life, retired, to do what I love, what I believe in, what my life has been defined by. It's pretty cool. And what's exciting is that I think the National Health Association, even though we've been around for 30 years and really are the fathers and mothers of the whole food, plant-based diet movement of today, nobody knows about us. At least not a lot of people know about us. But through shows like this, I did an interview with Chef AJ. It's been viewed over 8,000 times. And people are joining the NHA every time I refresh my inbox. Somebody new is joining. And that's exciting. So, long may it keep, as Dean Martin used to say, keep those cards and letters coming.
I love it. And so you're absolutely right. And I think that's a fabulous mission. And I thank you for your service to bringing health to individuals. I think that's amazing.
It
So
makes my day when I bump into people like you.
I mean, it would be, these are just resources we need to get in front of the people who can make even a bigger change, right? Because I'm a big fan of like studying sociology and positive psychology and the different things. So I consider physicians, I really want to get involved with education with medical students at some point. What happens is you have these social networks, right? And so what is it, like 6 degrees of separation between everyone on earth or something like that? So what they found is in studies, which I'm sure you're aware of, that if even people you don't know, but if they're 2, points away from you because your sister's best friend happens to be obese, you're more likely to be obese. So I'm thinking, well, imagine physicians. So we have contact with probably on average of 1,500 to 2,000 patients annually, with typically your panel. If they were sharing this message and it was sent out and then one person changed it and, geez, that ripple effect could be so amazing, but we have to get in front of them early. These medical students, that's it for me. That seems to be my mission.
And I think that what you're doing and what Alan, I think almost everyone in the whole food plant-based health movement, they're back to what, again, the early hygienists saw their role as physicians, as teachers. You're teaching people how to live, not just getting them well. You're teaching them how to prevent themselves from getting sick, and let alone know what to do when they do get sick, how to recover their health. But it's all about teaching people that healthcare really is self-care. Health does result from healthful living. You don't have to be dependent on the doctor for everything that goes wrong. That's real.
Yeah, and and that right there is a whole nother can of worms that you could go, open up. I mean, when you start speaking about patients and the culture of, not taking on that self-responsibility, self-care role, right? They're like, well, I can't imagine giving this up because I would need this. And, I need to go to the doctor, just give me my pill. I mean, it's really frustrating for me sometimes when I present this potential life-saving information to someone and they just brush you off. I mean, I don't push it, but it's just like, I want to help everyone, but you can't. I understand that. But it is frustrating sometimes.
Like
we said
earlier, you're looking for those people that are open, that will be willing to listen. And fortunately, there's a lot of them.
There are. And you know what? I'll tell you what. I really believe that there's a divine entity involved here because, in my personal opinion, because when we gave up, literally when I went home overnight and literally cleaned out the whole house, everything plant-based after that, what we had left, we ate vegetables and stuff. But there was a quart of grass-fed beef in my refrigerator, or my freezer in the garage. And I didn't know what to do with that. First of all, it cost a lot of money. And I was like, Jesus, a lot of money. But I can't give it to any human because I'm going to be killing them. So this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, how am I going to get rid of this? Give it to an animal shelter? What am I going to do? Because you just can't throw that out in the garage. I mean, out in your dumpster. And it's a huge old carcass. We lived in Colorado. And so what happened was 2 days later, we left. We went to church. We came back. That freezer had broke. Okay. I don't know if you've ever smelled. Yes. So if you've ever smelt this, the blood and the smell. I've never been, I was like, so in my life. Like I never really craved meat but it tasted fine. I liked the taste. I never even thought twice about that after that incident. And, I'm thinking back and going, it would have been so easy for the kids or my husband to go, hey, we have this meat, we should use it up. And, after family pressures, I'm sure I would have caved at some point. I'm pretty stubborn, but I can cave. And then, even though I had these amazing experiences, I had a lupus patient too in that time, they did much better. I probably would have caved, and then I would have never gone down this track. I would have never had this conversation with you, but I truly believe it. And when I have interactions with people, they're like, it's so weird that you mentioned that because this happened. It was like a priming. I was like, no, there's no more coincidences. I have so many of these. They happen every single day.
My only startling moment, kind of like along the lines of what you're talking about, when I was a freshman at the University of Pittsburgh. As a freshman, you had to live in the dormitories. So here I am, this raw food, plant-based guy in 1969. at the University of Pittsburgh. And so my parents, who had a health food store, would ship me a box of produce every week. And I'd go to the Greyhound bus station, I'd pick it up and bring it. So where did the University of Pittsburgh allow me to keep my box of food in the cafeteria? In the meat cooler. So I'd go in the meat cooler, and there'd be this blood from chickens and beef and all that all over the floor, and I'd have to go in there to get it. And I'm thinking, man, I got to, after 6 months, I needed to get my own apartment. This was tough stuff. I mean, it was tough.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So
I never really, meat has never really, I mean, even though I'm kind of vegan, I've never really kind of understood people eating hamburgers and roast beef. And even to this day, it's kind of funny, maybe just from my vantage point, I don't eat veggie burgers because it's kind of like saying, well, why, if I wouldn't eat a hamburger, why would I eat a veggie burger? It just kind of doesn't fit. But,
right.
But on the other hand, I think that when I grew up, the only thing that ever really got me, I never really judged what other people did because I just wasn't interested. But when I'd see somebody roasting a pig on a spit and there would be the head of the pig, I'm thinking, there's something wrong with the world. This is really, and I never got that. But other than that, I kind of all right, you want to eat your roast beef sandwich, go ahead. And,
right, absolutely. Yeah. No, I understand. I get it. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. I mean, it was an interesting childhood, but we always had a vegetable garden. So we raised a lot of our own food, a lot of zucchini.
Had a garden and a compost pile before people knew the word.
Yep. I mean, we were back in the 70s. That's what we did because we didn't have the money to buy. So we got some fruit, but not a lot of fruit, just because, what we could grow, apples, neighbors, peaches, things. But what's interesting, they always slaughtered a hog every year. And I remember witnessing that once as a child and just finding it really grotesque. And, but I never really put together the entity of a life and a feeling of an animal in that. You know what I mean? I thought it was gross in the sense of blood and guts, but it never really, it didn't click for me. Like my daughter, when she was 2, very vocal child, very verbal. I didn't say vocal, she's quiet demeanor, but very sweet. But she was almost 3, but we'd gone to a grocery store, a supermarket, and there were crabs there. They have them there, they're live, and you buy them in lobsters. Yeah.
That's one of the things that gets me.
Yeah. And so Emily, she understood this concept even so young, super bright kid. We're in a grocery store. Why are there lobsters in a glass case in the grocery store? And it's like, well, people, eat them. And she's really upset. She was just like, what do you mean? Like she didn't really understand the death concept of the animal that she was on her plate, but that really bothered her. And
dump it in a boiling hot water. That's another
yes. And I never even, I never was a big seafood fan, so I never bought that stuff and cooked it. So I think if I'd have witnessed that, I probably would have been vegan much earlier in my life. But I find it frustrating for myself why I didn't start, these experiences didn't coagulate until it was a health change. And I wish I'd have been more perceptive as a young person about it. But of course, you can't have regrets.
I guess, again, just the way the world works. I've often wondered why people can slaughter a gentle cow and not think anything about it, but they wouldn't think about doing that to their dog or their horse. Somehow that would be offensive or cruel or something.
Right.
A deer, you could do a little Bambi. You could shoot a Bambi, but you can't. I don't know. It's just world, as we mentioned earlier, world would be a lot better place.
Yeah.
If we had different food choices.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. It is. I never met a vegan until I went vegan. I mean, I don't recall ever meeting an ethical vegan and someone having that conversation with me, which is unfortunate because I think I would have been an easy convert. If someone would have just laid out the logical conclusion for me, I was like, oh.
Just means you're a late bloomer.
I am a late bloomer. But it's really interesting. When I ask patients, because I tend to start with dairy. Dairy's a really easy one to get people to go, oh, yeah, I never thought of that. Meat's a little more difficult. I let that kind of slide in later. But what I go is like, what was the original intention of a cow's, mother cow's milk. And they go, well, for me to drink. I was like, no, you're not a cow. Who was that for? And some patients honestly cannot think outside it. But if I'd have said a baby cat's milk or a mama's cat, they're for the baby cats. But when they start talking about a cow, they cannot ratchet their, thinking upright and go, oh, for a mother cow to feed her baby cow. Oh, wow, a calf. I mean, some patients, it's like so difficult when I say it's for the calf. They're like, oh, I never thought of it that way. We're so, the advertising and the environment in our culture that is just, you're like, what? We don't need cows to live for milk? No, you don't.
Dr. Shelton's first book was written in 1926, an oversized book called Human Life, Its Philosophy and Laws. It's a real collector's item. And he writes in the preface about that, about how difficult it is for people, physicians, as well as for people to overcome generations of conditioning about how we're supposed to think, about how physicians think about the essential nature of disease and health. And for people, what is the proper diet? It's been going on. If we didn't have all the advertising, if we didn't have TV, if we didn't have all that stuff, there's been generations of conditioning that not everybody can overcome. Some people do. I mean, that's just, there was Max and Ruth Huberman in 1948 and 49. They just kind of the light went off. Lori Marbus in 15, 16 years into the game, it just kind of wakes up. My wife, the same. More and more, and again, more and more better information available, great resources by incredibly credible people. When you hear Caldwell Esselstyn speak, how can you not be persuaded? When you see Joel Furman, well, how can you not be persuaded? Lots of people can. But, if you're open at all, these are very, very credible exponents of this lifestyle. Joel Furman on public television, he's really good. He's really evolved. He's come so far as an articulate, passionate, persuasive spokesman of this lifestyle. Then it's just, again, if you're a little bit open, give yourself half a chance, you can really be inspired. Unfortunately, there's places to go like True North where you really do need, to go in jail for a little while to kind of shut out the rest of the world to give yourself a shot. And certainly if you have a chronic condition, to do that.
Yeah,
so these are just great times. As much as many problems as we have politically, socially, economically, from the standpoint of those seeking a better way in terms of health and well-being, there's never been a better time to get information.
You're absolutely right. And I just, when you start learning about intermittent fasting, and that's a whole nother level of amazing information and science. It's evolving, and it's incredible the opportunities we have. And I will tell you, the first book I read was Dr. Campbell's, the China study. And I read that book in 2 days. That's how intrigued I don't know if anyone's read that book, but I mean, I read it cover to cover.
It's a hard read.
I was so like,
to live.
I mean, I was like, holy moly, are you kidding? They turn off cancer like a light switch? What? And I was just like, what have I been doing? And, because I always wanted to live with integrity and do the best for my patients. Because it's just.
And I don't know how many of your listeners know, but when I interviewed Dr. Campbell in one of the issues of the magazine a couple of years ago, one of the things that I knew that most people don't know about T. Colin Campbell that I wasn't sure he'd even want to talk about or would be willing to talk about. But when the China study came out in the early 90s, he was, this was a big deal, and he was really in demand and all that. And one of the problems he had is that he had developed a speech impediment. He had a problem with his tongue that he couldn't speak. He had been exposed to what we now know as dioxin in some of his work. And was really, and had reached out to one of our members of our association, came to one of our conferences and met with Alan Goldhammer and Alec Burton and Frank Sabatino and these physicians, and said, hey, I got this problem. And he was just knew about dairy and protein and things like that, but he didn't really understand the whole spectrum of the whole food plant-based diet movement. Certainly didn't know about water fasting. And they all talked to him and said, the body has some pretty amazing capacities given conditions conducive to recovery that water fasting can sometimes do. So he went out to True North. I don't know if you know that story, but he went out to True North on a couple of occasions, regained his speech, which is an amazing thing. I mean, this was like in the 90s, and that's where when he writes a book about that's where his picture got bigger about what he was doing. He understood what was the deleterious effects of protein and dairy and how that has created all these degenerative conditions. But he didn't understand the big picture till he came in contact with the National Health Association and Alan Goldhammer and began to understand the body as a whole. And it was a really interesting experience, and it's just great to consider him kind of one of us also.
Absolutely. He's one of my favorite. I really enjoyed my conversation with him.
He's deeply philosophic. He's deeply philosophic too, which is what I'm attracted to him, is that lots of folks approach things from a medical standpoint, but there's a philosophy that underlies everything he does and how he sees everything. And when he talks about a whole, it's impressive. It's impressive just to listen to him. Pearls come out of his mouth just like they do Caldwell and spokespeople that we're blessed to have these days.
Absolutely. And what's really cool is that with my position now at the Journal, I get to interact with these people all the time. It's like, this would be like a groupie.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, you get to be sitting, it's like a groupie if you were in the middle of the, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and all the rock stars were like at your beck and, not beck and call, but you could reach out to them and say, hey, I get this, and they respond and they're excited to speak to you. It's like, oh yeah, that's like.
And by the way, speaking of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, if people come to our conference this year, June 29th to July 1st in Cleveland, we're arranging a trolley tour to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So if you've never done that in downtown,
really?
That's worth almost the price of admission right there. And there's also a great, the Cleveland, Cuyahoga Valley Metro Parks are like a hop, skip, and a jump from the hotel that we're at. We're arranging some beautiful hiking in there as well. So,
wonderful.
Reasons, not just good food and good speakers, but also some fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we're, speaking of hiking, my son, Gabriel came home for a few weeks. He's just finished his freshman year at CU in Colorado.
He had gone. In a ski accident?
Yes, he was snowboarding.
About his great recovery from that.
Yes, that's what I was about to say. Here's Gabe, 19, going down I don't know what's it called, a double black diamond. I didn't learn to ski it,
but I've lived to talk about it.
No. Gabe, they grew up, we were in Colorado, they grew up snowboarding and skiing, all the kids snowboard, but I was 28 the first time I got on skis. I personally do not have an adrenaline factor. I don't have that desire, I don't have that need, but the husband and the children do apparently. That's very strong genetics. And so Gabriel was going down a double black diamond, turned too late and hit a tree. And he said, Mom, he goes, it bent back my leg originally. And then it back, he goes, it hurt, and he screamed, and but then it kind of calmed down and they took him down. I get this phone call, Mom, I think I broke my leg. I just need a cast, I think, but they're going down the mountain, and the call drops for 20 minutes. I'm 1,000 miles away. And finally he gets hold of me, and he can't get into this little clinic they were going to. I said, go to the ER right now, young man. So he goes to the ER, and he just ends up with 2 plates and 22 screws. The tibia has 6 fractures. The fibula is the smaller bone on the lower leg. Like parts of it is literally dust. And so here he is. And what's really interesting, he's been plant-based. He was maybe not as a healthy plant-based eater as he should have been at school, but he stuck with it. And what was interesting, though, when I got there, I started scouring the research about foods and anti-inflammatory and bone growth and mineralization. I mean, I was diving deeper into the rabbit hole of bone health. And what was really interesting is, I created a regimen. That kid, I stayed a month. My job allowed me to do that. Thank goodness. I'm really blessed to have work for Doctors on Demand. And what was incredible was this kid had 0 pain after 8 days. None. I mean, he had minor pain then, but it was just gone, and he's not had any since. And we're less than 3 months out. He's been weight bearing, walking and riding his bike. And I'm just like,
You
It's
know
such a
what?
devastating.
That's the wonder for all the negative things we talk about. Modern medicine, emergency medicine, orthopedic
Mm,
is miraculous what they're able to do. And
yes,
obviously,
absolutely.
maximizing recovery is where people like you come in. But
Right.
what they're able to do today
It's
is nothing short
incredible.
of miraculous. And that's,
And
that's where I've always told people in our health movement that growing up that have been the anti-medicine, anti-doctors. No, 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 no.
mm,
There's a place. There's a very important
hmm
place. Now, get well and then get the hell out of the hospital as soon as you can. But
right.
you
Right.
don't stress over taking some pain medication or having some surgery or even a blood transfusion if you got to have it. Just
Mm,
don't let your principles outweigh your compromises and your health.
mm,
But they
mm,
can do some pretty amazing. My mother at age 90 had a broken hip, plate and the screws, and at 90,
hmm
and they put her
hmm
back, and she was stronger than she was before. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Right.
That's
Yep.
thank God for that.
Yep. And Dr. Esselstyn had a bike accident and had a hip fracture,
I
and he
saw it when
recovered.
it was amazing.
And so, just
That's at age
amazing.
19. That's
Yeah,
at
he
age.
was. Yeah, he was. Yeah, older, and so it's. But I will. Yeah, I will echo the sentiment that there was. He was in. We were very blessed to have a very skilled surgeon, and we're very thankful for him. And he was so excited to hear about the nutrition part. Like he actually started asking me, he goes, "What have you read?" And I told him, he's like, "Well, I'll tell you." And it impressed his physical therapist. She's like, "I can't believe how well your skin's healing." She goes, "I think I might go vegan just for that," because Gabe's sharing this information. And
Sign me up for the journal when we come out with it.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's coming along. Wow. Everyone I know has never launched a journal, so we're kind of doing this together, but
Right.
we've been really blessed with so much support. I can't even tell you how amazing it is. It's so just tickles me. But anyway,
It's been a lot of fun.
it is. It's a lot of fun. But wow, I've taken up your time. So I do so appreciate your time and sharing your information. And everyone who's listening, please look at the link below. There will be links with information about the conference and your email and the magazine and the association and the website and everything that's so wonderful they have to offer. So I so thank you for your time.
We got to get you to our next conference.
Absolutely. Yep. This year is busy with daughters getting married, and I will
And
be
kids
running.
recovering from ski accidents.
Lord help me. I just pray. That's all a mother can do at this point. Is like they're adults, they're off, and prayers. But I have such amazing children. I'm really blessed. We're really blessed. So, so I can only do is be thankful, right?
Absolutely.
All right, sir. Well, thank you again.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right.